This is a clickbaity question because
Many people on the internet love to learn about gear and equipment. So, can you describe your podcast setup? What did you buy? What the budget?
all right, yes. So I'm actually very happy with that because, first of all, what kind of podcast I want to have. I decided that I really want to start with and stick to a face-to-face podcast. Actually, in 2023, I video messaged some people from LinkedIn to ask them if they would be willing to do a video podcast. And I was very pleasantly surprised that I got some responses. And then I decided not to start with the endeavor, not to start online, because I spend so much time on a screen anyway. And to have a physical, in-person podcast, it's more wholesome. I can make some actual physical friends made of flesh and vibes, you know? It's so much better. Okay, so, but to have a physical podcast, it takes much more equipment. So first decision that was extremely easy to make is if it would be an audio-only podcast or a video podcast. And there is no way anyone would seriously start an audio-only podcast if they would suspect that it can grow. I don't know. I think it's a very good practice. I don't want to discourage people from doing audio only because it's a very interesting and useful exercise. But the thing is, to discover someone, to start liking listening to someone, it's much easier to introduce that person, that experience through video, and then you stick to the audio. And this is just my experience because I'm listening to podcasts. I almost never watch a podcast. But in order to find a new podcast, it's useful. I see some shorts or some interviews or some bits on YouTube and say, oh, that person has a podcast. Let me listen. It's nice. It can be clipped. It can add visibility, credibility, and it is also nice for the person who is being a guest, who is interviewed or have a discussion with, to have that footage, to have those videos, to use them in their own social media, in their own kind of portfolio. So if I do my job as a podcast host nice and good, people would be very happy to share clips of their interview with me. So I would be giving them a big gift, which is also nice promotion for my cause. So this is a kind of long-winded way to say, I think it does make sense to start with a video podcast. Now, do I have a budget for a video studio with 2 or 3 DSLR cameras and a switcher and those fancy SMB7, how they're called, these microphones? Not at all, but thankfully, we live in 2023 for 5. These are 2 small cameras, and one of which I have for many years. It is the Osmo Pocket 2. It's a little gimbal camera, which also connects wirelessly to a microphone, which is quite good. I've been using this camera for videos and street interviews. I was never dissatisfied with the video, let me put it that way. The video doesn't blow your mind. It's not impressive in any sense, but it's very, very usable. The audio is very good. Wireless audio, good quality. So what I did is I bought another identical Osmo Pocket 2 with its own microphone. And this is my video and audio setup. I have this old voice recorder for backup audio in case something fails with those microphones, and I will test also how it works on the computer. And also there's this very useful feature of Adobe which uses AI to clean the sound and make it like studio-like, mic-like. So you can upload your audio to Adobe. I happen to have a subscription because I use Photoshop and Premiere a lot. And it can give me really, really good audio from those mic. So this is also a test of the Lav mic. This is the Rode Smart Lav Plus. This is good for mobile phones, but also for the transmitter, receiver of the DJI Pocket. So one is standalone here, one of the transmitters. One of the wireless mics is standalone, and the other has the lav mic plugged in. And I will see what makes sense to use for my guest. I only have one of those, but they are very inexpensive if I find that the sound is better. But I think that sound is good enough. Video is good enough with enough light. My lights are all light bulbs that I bought for 5 to 7 euros each. They are LED light bulbs that are equivalent to 100 watt of, how it's called, incandescent, like the old school light. So I think there's 17 watt LEDs, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 just dispersed around. I know nothing about lighting. I know I should have some key light, blah, blah, blah light. But if it's bright enough for the camera to not have much noise, then I can put a nice adjustment layer to make a bit of halo in Premiere and deal with the video. What I'm not sure about and what I really need to test, and I would test it in the long form podcast I would have with my artist persona, is the reliability in the long run. So these cameras don't have a recording limit. They are plugged in USB-C to not have a battery problem. The battery of the mic lasts very long. But I don't know if after 1, 2, 3 hours I will have some issue with recording, some overheating, although it's not really hot here. So this is something I want to test. And audio check, very cheap. Video check. So these cameras cost second-hand 250 euros each, which is a 500 euro budget for audio and video, which is insanely cheap. And believe me, if the podcast content is good enough, and if I don't mind to spend a little bit of time in editing, because the cost you pay for having to edit things is that you don't have a smooth workflow, but you don't need a smooth, optimized workflow to do your first 20, 30 podcasts, right? If I get to 30, 40, 50 podcasts and everything is working smoothly, maybe by that time I will have the budget to buy equipment that will save me time in editing. What would I say? Yes, the very important thing that nobody seems to talk about much is the chairs. I wanted to have some chairs that are clean, that they look clean, that they feel clean to sit on and comfortable. And so I spend a lot of time trying to choose those chairs that I can also relatively easy store, because the gallery is a small space here. I'm very happy with those chairs. And if I am to invite someone to sit in the gallery to have this conversation without stressing about time, I should really have the minimum. What would they care about the camera, about the sound, if they're uncomfortable? It doesn't work. So I'm very happy with these chairs. And this was like the last thing I bought. They arrived yesterday. Now I think I have everything I need in terms of equipment to start this podcast. It was beautiful. I'm so passionate about the chairs.
All right. So can you sum the total of money you had to spend to have this podcast set up?
So the chairs costed 160, both of them, 160 euros. Cameras and mics are 500. This tripod is really cheap. I have an implement on which I have both cameras. So let's say another 20. These are all things I have since long time. But if you were to buy everything from scratch, I would say 800 euros is the budget of the material stuff. But the skills are important. Like if you know how to edit videos, if you know how to clean sound. So this would cost another few hours to learn. Plus I have the Adobe subscription. There are some free models to clean the sound. Let's say under 1,000 euros, you can start a 2-person video podcast. But what is even more important, I think, is to practice and learn how to speak coherently, but also much more how to listen. And this is something that I need to learn, because I remember in my street interviews, I would interrupt people. Here's my big challenge. Every time I get bored every time I hear the person saying something trivial or repeating some points that you can tell, you can feel that they're not genuine, they're not honest, they're like not plagiarism, but there's some opinions, there's some viewpoints and some talking points that people are supposed to have. We are supposed to say this thing when this topic is discussed. And those defaults, those templates can be different for different people. So for example, let me say, if I ask you about, I don't know, climate change, oh, it is very important that we save the planet. Yeah, okay. You can tell if that person doesn't care and doesn't know, but they want to see something. Instead of saying, I don't know, this is not something I spend much time thinking about, they start reciting the default answer. And whenever that happens in my interviews, I get bored and I try to change the topic or shake things up, or I try to ask something that would bring out something genuine. And by the way, genuine is, I don't know, like, I don't know. And we all do that. I'm guilty of doing that all the time, of snapping into some mumbly template that doesn't contain any information. But yeah, whenever people do that, when they talk to me, I have this habit and tendency to interrupt them and shake things off instead of patiently listening to the thing that this thing doesn't exist. Like, they don't speak, they just say words, right? So I have to tune my tolerance to that. And as I develop my skills as a podcast host and as an interviewer, it is my job to find the right path of questions and the right path, the right vibe maybe, so that people snap into those talking points as little as possible. And in my opinion, this is what makes an interviewer, podcast host, even a journalist good. So Joe Rogan, for example, is very good at this because he is being so honest at this moment that it wouldn't make sense. You might not even think, like if you hang out with someone and start feeling like really comfortable and real and alive, I don't know, then you don't talk with talking points. You just talk out of your being. You're just breathing out your words. You're not, they come from here. They don't come from the cortex that has saved some registered talking points. So that is my holy grail, no? But one of my objectives as an interviewer, and we started talking about equipment and we are there now, but one of my objectives as an interviewer, of the most important ones, is to give people the permission and the opportunity, the impulse, the excuse, whatever, to be themselves. And be themselves. What does it mean to be yourself? I don't know, but I know what it means to be yourself. It means to speak words, what I said before. You can see it, you can feel it. And it's beautiful because what people say is secondary to the fact that they have their own thoughts. Like, I can have the stupidest ideas, maybe I do. People will tell me in the comments as they do. But they are mine. Why is it important to speak my ideas? I will tell you why it's important to speak my ideas. Because I most likely don't act on them. And if I would be to act on those ideas, they should at least be presented. I don't know, because they may be stupid ideas. This is the thing, that people who hate political correctness, and I'm guilty of disliking political correctness, we fail to see its utility. Political correctness, interestingly, is a form of conservatism, is complacency, is adhering to a norm that is safe, and it's not going to get you in trouble, basically. So political correctness is not getting you in trouble, Of course, there is this weird social justice warrior exception to the cause, but generally speaking, political correctness is a conservative mindset that helps you avoid trouble and also helps you call yourself a good person or a nice person or an ethical person. And I think it's better to act politically correct if your genuine impulse is, I don't know. But if you think you know better, regardless of whether you are right or not, if you think you know better than the political correct thing, it's your responsibility to say it. And it has a cost. And this is why people who speak their mind against political correctness are considered brave in some ways, because what is it to be brave is to say something that you might get in trouble for. We complain in the West that we get in trouble for things we say, which you do, but it's nothing like the way it used to be in other countries. Anyway, freedom of speech. I like free speech. We started on equipment, yeah.
All right. You ramble. You like rambling, we know. So, what else should I ask you about your podcast? Yes, tell me about your strategy. How are you going to find people to travel from wherever they live, come here, climb the stairs, sit on this chair for hours? You have 0 followers in any social media. You have 0 accredited, established credentials. Okay, you graduated at university, but you're basically no one. So why would anyone want to sit with you for 3 hours or however long you ask them to sit down?
Okay, that is a very good question and a very legitimate question. I've been thinking a lot about why would anyone bother spending their time and energy and exposure and, be filmed on the camera just to speak with me. Why would anyone do that with a reasonable mind? And the answer is, honestly, they shouldn't. No one should, without a path of me establishing some credibility or some allure. So here's my strategy, and I haven't run it yet, so I don't know how it will turn out. But my strategy is, first of all, I start uploading videos like this to show what the hell I'm doing, how I speak, how I conduct myself, what I want to do with the people I bring here and everything. So people have some clear idea of what this experience could be. So transparency, let's call it transparency. And the other thing is, since I decided to do this thing in person, and even if my studio is very portable, I would prefer people to come here because this is my place. This is like, I am the host, so I'm hosting in my place. So to bring people here, I think I should first go and meet them where they are and have a coffee with them, have a beer. So my plan is to contact some people in my city that I think might know of someone else that would want to come here and talk with me, or that would want to talk with me in the first place. So my idea is, the people I reach, I ask them to give me some references. Some of these people will also nominate themselves. I don't know how many. And then we should have a call with someone. We should have a Zoom call and say, hi, I explain the concept, the project, because, nobody has time to watch the videos. They may have watched something. If not, I will explain on the spot how the thing works. And then I would offer to go meet them near the neighborhood, near their work, wherever they want, as long as it's in the range of the city, to meet in person, not without cameras, without any commitment, just hang out, check the vibes, talk about each other's projects, whatever. And so I think that if we meet for a coffee or a beer, then it will be easy to decide, both of us, if we want that person comes here and we have the podcast. So that's my strategy, kind of 4 steps. I think that this is a fairly good sequence of increasing investment and increasing commitment, which starts low and builds higher as they would hopefully see more benefit in engaging with me longer. The city is not small, it's more than 1 million people. So if I send enough messages, if I send enough invitations, I think I should have my first few guests. And then, of course, if they have a good time, that's also kind of a testimonial, that's also kind of credibility, that's a bit of material that is already online for other people to see if this is something they would like to be in the place of. And with that system, with that mindset, I think it's not so important that I don't have an audience, because my objective with inviting people is that they have a net positive experience that is completely relevant to the fact that this is filmed and taped and will be posted online. So I don't want anyone to come here just to have the video material out of it, just for the content. The content should be like a happy accident, a happy side effect, like an extra thing. My desire, my will, my objective is, even if the cameras don't work or whatever, that the person who comes here and has the conversation with me would be very grateful that, they spend this time. It was time well spent, regardless of the video. And so, if that's the case, then I don't need to have any followers. I don't need to have any publicity. And in fact, it's better because I can be 100% sure, I'm not famous, I'm not wealthy. So why the hell would you want to hang out with me? The only reason that you would want to hang out with me is if you believe that would benefit you for the sake of the interaction, not for some, external benefit that, maybe he will fund my cause or maybe I will get some followers. You will gain nothing besides a good conversation. So actually, that's not a bad way to start a media endeavor, because if I can craft my project, my system, my communication so that's the case, then happy accident, that's good enough to monetize later. But now I don't need to think about money, I just need to think, how are you comfortable? Got you good chair, got you some good vibes, you want to drink something, simple things, and to be cordial with you, but also to be, the zone of proximal development. So if I'm a yes man and whatever you say, I nod my head and say, 100% agree, 100%, that's not a good experience. When I interact with someone in this format, I try to do this, in my opinion, very healthy thing that when you say something, when you speak for some time, you say some things I agree with, you say some things I disagree with, you say some things I don't know about. Also, you may say some things I know about more. So, active listening is, without me taking too much time to talk, would be that I endorse and build up your points that I agree with and I find wholesome and useful. And then maybe the points I disagree with, instead of saying, I disagree, maybe the best way to be to interrogate more. It's like, explain this to me because I feel I can resonate, I can understand 1, 2, 3, but what about 4? You spoke about 4 and I don't get how that is also a good point. Can you help me understand that? So I'm not saying it's a bad point. I may think it's a bad point, but I'm interested to know the best built version of that point I disagree with. Maybe I should speak with specific examples, but I should try not to get so spicy.
What are the profiles of your first guests? What kind of people would you like to have here? And I know you talked about people who speak honest and genuine and they don't recite talking points that they don't feel, but okay, that's a good prerequisite. But what kind of profiles would help you find these kinds of people, or what other demographics maybe you're interested in approaching first?
So here's my thinking. I'm not a good interviewer, I'm not a good podcast host yet, by the sheer fact that I haven't done it at all. Okay, so I'm inexperienced. Also, since this is a system that I run solo, when I interview someone, when I talk with someone, I have to mind the audio, the video, any other things that might go wrong during the interview. I say all this to say that I would prefer that the first people that come here to talk with me, we vibe very easily. And that's not to say that I don't enjoy engaging with people who we are very different with and that we disagree with, and that, there is a danger of offending each other or kind of arguing. That's totally fine. Actually, that's something that is interesting because it's also a good challenge for me to manage to stay within boundaries and bring people that disagree with me in many things and still have a net positive experience for both of us. So actually, that's something I really want to do. But I think the wise thing is to avoid bringing people that we might not communicate very well in my first podcast, because my brain is not smart and skilled enough to be 100% focused in the conversation while it's still juggling all the other things. So this is a way to say, I will try to bring people that it's very likely that we speak the same language. Now, what is that language? That language has components of English, first of all. It's an English-speaking podcast. It would be easier for me if the first few people who come here to have the interview speak very fluent English. They don't need, of course, to be native English speakers. I am also not a native English speaker, but that would make everything flow smoother. It would be nice if they were enthusiastic and the voice was clear, and I communicate better with people who have a background or a career in science and engineering, because these are places I have been around. And so, for example, if I would have the opportunity to talk with someone who is working as an engineer versus as a manager or some corporate position, I think I would probably learn more from the corporate guy, but I would be more comfortable with the engineer person. These are not prerequisites, these are heuristics, how to say this word, that would give me a higher chance that we vibe and the conversation can run smoothly for a very long time. So I would say people with background in science and engineering, people that are not very young, so I would say between 40 and 50, I think would be perfect. Again, it's a little bit my comfort zone. So my comfort zone is 45-year-old engineer guys who like to DIY and they are nerdy in their own ways. And by the way, guys, not women, also for the same reason, it would be so much easier for me to stress about fewer things. Of course, I like women, but that's not necessarily a feature that can be a bug. Let's say, sometimes I make stupid jokes, sometimes I say things that offend people, men and women, but I'm always trying to be much more careful and more politically correct around women. Also, another problem could be that if I'm actually having too much of a good time, like if there is some chemistry, if there is some vibe, that's beautiful, but I don't want this energy to be on camera. I don't like, sometimes there is a little bit of chemistry that you can see in podcasts and shows, and this is very cute, and it's like, actually this makes the podcast really nice. But because I don't know how to handle this, I don't have experience as a podcast host at all, this is another variable that I don't want to have to deal with, because I have to deal with all the technical stuff, I have to deal with trying to make this endeavor kind of work. So I think my comfort zone is something like guys with background in science, engineering, parenting that are over 40 years old, or some kind of crazy artist. The thing with crazy artist guys is maybe I'm one of those. They don't listen really, most of them. They just want to say their bit, and it can be very charming, but I don't know how long that can be sustainable. So that would be more of like a 20-minute interview rather than a 3-hour podcast. Because really, I've met some really fascinating guys who do their thing, and I'm scared that I am or I would become one of them, because those people live in their own bubble so much that they don't care that they don't listen. They don't care that they don't communicate, because their gift to the world is who they are being and what they are being. And when you receive that gift, you are already grateful. You're like, thank you, man. He showed me some different perspective. Or he reminded me of a perspective that the previous crazy guy showed me 3 years ago. And I'm very grateful for that. But then I don't know what else can we do, because obviously you cannot have a conversation because you're not interested in my life. And good for you, because if you are interested in people's lives, you might have not built your beautiful world. Yeah. So this is the caveat about beautiful souls that they are in their bubble. And once again, I think I'm close to that direction. And to be honest, doing this podcast is also an effort, to socialize and be less in my own head, or at least have the option to not be in my own head. And that's why I like talking with these people, but I don't know if we can have a long form thing, and, the rapport may be lost. So, engineering materials and methods, research and development, statistical pitfalls, those things I'm very comfortable talking about. Epidemiological, what are the limits, Now, does this make an interesting podcast for the audience? I don't know, but I don't care in the beginning. Once again, I have to set priorities. So my number one priority is to have the person who is here have a great time, regardless of what will come out as content. Because this is the wholesome thing. Like, you can figure out how to monetize a wholesome thing, but if you're all marketing and no product, if you're all content and no substance, there's nothing. So yeah.
Let's do a last question, because you alluded to monetization. Are you going to monetize this podcast in some way? Is that part of your goal?
And I'm laughing because this is my favorite question and topic to talk about. So here's the thing. I fucking love listening to podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. I do listen to podcasts all the time. I should be listening to less of podcasts and more audiobooks, but I just like this format of interact. It's so natural. I don't like the produced NPR with the sounds and two people talking. I don't even like when it's 3. 2 people talking, long, deep, like hours, and it's like, it's when these people get to their honest vibe, it's so beautiful. So I want to do something like that. There's 2 things I don't like about podcasts, okay? And obviously this is the way they make money. Sponsorships, subscriptions. It makes it cheaper to see, your idol, this is like a person that you respect so much, speak those fake words about this product that you don't know if it's legitimate and they don't know if it's legitimate, or just have the podcast interrupted by some commercial, and okay, they make money that way. I don't blame them per se, because I don't know the industry. Financially, I'm sure it makes sense, but I don't like it. Am I allowed to not like something? Am I allowed to not like commercials? All right. So what some other people do, for example, Sam Harris, is they offer subscriptions. And he's so generous that he's like, if you don't want to pay the subscription, you don't have money, send me an email and I will just, give you the content for free. But anyway, voluntary, Patreon, or some extra stuff. This is how Substack is monetized, which I find a bit weird with the writing. I don't like subscriptions. I pay a lot of subscriptions. I don't like to be the guy who asks for your money in a regular basis. And also, I don't like to be a guy who advertises products and services that I cannot 100% vouch for, or even if I can now, then the podcast is not evergreen. Luckily, in my case, and that's not true for other people, but I am in the very, very fortunate position to have my own product, which I stand for immensely. So since last year, I decided to be an artist. I make art that I like to see in the world. I make the best art that I know. That's not because I'm the best artist. I'm not. That's because the only way to make something that I find meaningful is that if it kind of makes sense, that it should exist, but it doesn't exist, I'm like, why it doesn't exist? It must exist, and then I make it. This is the best product thing I can advertise in the website. I couldn't love making something more than the art I make at this moment, until I hopefully have some children, which I will hopefully love more than my art, but that's another point. So not only I can advertise something that I find meaningful, but actually I don't really need to. Let me explain why. First of all, if I do advertisements, they can be comical. I can roast myself and just use a very deprecating and silly vibe to sell the art. Maybe I can do it in the end of every podcast. But that's not even necessary for two reasons. One is that, the podcast, it's a kind of a credibility thing for the brand of my name, Antony Kalogerakis. I just call it the Antony Kalogerakis podcast. And what else does this guy do? Oh, he does art. So basically, the podcast would hopefully infuse my art with meaning and credibility and make it more desirable because, it's the context of the art, it's the story of the creator, which, by the way, I think shouldn't be necessary. So my objective is to make art that doesn't need the context to be appreciated, but it doesn't harm. No, it's going to make it much more powerful. And then, of course, the art can link back to the podcast. So I don't want you to support me financially if I have a product that I can actually sell you. And then I don't want you to buy this product to support me. I want you to buy this product because you cannot live without it in your life. It's kind of very important that you have it. Regardless of who I am, regardless of who made it, I know it's impossible to disconnect them. If you have watched some of my stuff, if you love me, you will love my art more. If you hate me, you will like my art less, or you will hate my art. Fair enough. So this is inevitable, and this is good marketing. Nonetheless, I do have something to sell you, and I do have something to sell you not as a podcast guest, but as an artist. And then that solves it. That solves monetization. Can I make more money if this thing gains some traction and some subscribers and some numbers? Can I make more money advertising other things than my art? Maybe, but not even certainly, because the format without subscriptions and without the sponsors is so clean. It's so clean that it's kind of more expensive. It's more valuable, in my opinion. Like, I would love some of the podcast people that, have millions and millions of dollars. Okay, they can book some deals, but I would like to see them take the ads off their podcasts just because they can. It's like, fuck you. I don't need to have this. I have fuck you money now. And fuck you means I don't need your stupid sponsorships, and I'm not gonna ask you for any subscription. And I have a lot of shit you can buy anyway from me, so why would I ask more? So again, this is me being naive because I don't have this type of money, I don't have this type of business, I don't really know how it works. So this is a big asterisk. If somebody can explain to me how is not very feasible or financially harmful for somebody to earn a few $1,000,000 less per year if they already make a couple of millions and just deliver a podcast that is pure, which in my opinion, this is beauty. This is real beauty. And a podcast with a sponsorship in the middle, cutting off the conversation, it's just taking a beautiful piece of art and adding a sticker of the fucking hot dog stand, McDonald's, whatever. It's no. The fact that it is so beautiful makes it so atrocious to spoil it with scammy ads. Okay, so that's my pet peeve for the many of the podcasts I love. And if I can do without it, and listen to what I'm saying, if I can, as if somebody's forcing me, as if this thing that costs $0 isn't already good enough. I don't need better equipment. I just need better people, better ideas, better communication skills. Sure, I may need to hire someone, but then if I believe in my art so much, that should be the only thing that I advertise, and I do believe in my art so much. So that's all the monetization, the credibility, and the way the podcast builds my art through my profile, because it would build my profile as a hopefully insightful and credible person in some ways, should be enough so that I don't need to have any sponsorships and any subscriptions in this podcast. And okay, this is wishful thinking, but let me start this way and see if I will sell my soul to the devil in the future. That's very likely. I hope not, but we will find out.
All right, Antony, thank you for talking to me, which is yourself, about how you plan to run this new podcast. I wish you success and perseverance more, because you will definitely have a lot of incidents that will get you to want to stop. You will definitely have times that you will be like, no, too much work, too much trouble, maybe some stupid lawsuit from some, I don't know. You will have those things, so expect them, and also make sure you keep going, because it's probably good stuff, and you will never know if it's good stuff if you don't do it. So you better do it, man.
That was very motivational. You like my joke?